Yo, what's up, guys? Welcome to the YPFL Talk issue 13. This is Leonard König. I'm here with Sebastian Lemke
Hey guys.
and with our special guest, Brian Rayos.
Hey guys, happy to be here.
So, you might have realized that we have kind of switched up our let's say, schedule within the podcast. We're not like talking about theoretical stuff for 30 minutes and then let the guests jump in. That was kind of stale, we thought, so we are just sharing all the talk, all the stuff with our guest. And I mean, Worlds is getting closer. It's gonna be there soon. And if you've ever wondered how people prepare for Worlds, you're going to know after this podcast. So, Brian, you nearly missed out on Worlds this year, which is really sad.
Yeah,
You,
it was a really crazy experience because going into this year's North American World Championship qualifier, I honestly didn't expect too much from myself, as weird as that might sound, because usually something that I like to emphasize with my friends and people that I play with is to always have confidence in yourself when you're going into a tournament. But over the past year, since I guess UDS Kansas City in August of 2018, my season had been like super mediocre at the large events that I attended, such as the 200th YCS, YCS London, YCS Pasadena, events such as those. I didn't do all that great, but to be fair, I also typically played some pretty trash decks at those events too. Um, I had told myself for the majority of those events, I'm like, I'm just going to go to have fun. I don't really want to try too much this event. And that obviously costed me in my tournament results for those events. However, for the North American World Championship qualifier, obviously I played Salamangreat. Going into the event, I wanted to play a deck that, like a real deck, if that makes sense, in comparison at least to the decks that I had been playing over the past format.
Yeah.
And
what
in the
were these
oh
decks
yeah, please
actually?
go ahead.
What were these decks when you're saying trashy decks and so on? What
Oh,
did you
okay.
play
So
there?
yeah. So at the 200th YCS, I played a very bad list of Trickstar. So I did terrible there. At YCS London, I played Altergeist, and while that was a good choice, I've had like terrible experience with Altergeist in my, now that I've played it at a few events. I played it at YCS London, and I started off okay. I tied round 1 and then won 5 in a row, and then the last 2 rounds I just bricked back to back. Unfortunately, all 4 games. And then for YCS Pasadena, which was the large event that came after London, I decided for some reason to play Altergeist again, and that was also just a terrible choice because Altergeist just sucks, man. Or maybe I just or maybe I just break too much with it, but I'm just really not a fan of that deck.
Yeah,
And then for
Leonard and
YCS,
me have the same experience with the deck. We both have bricked
Yeah.
quite a bit with Altergeist as well. And we tried again and tried again, but it didn't work for us as well.
yeah,
So many mistakes.
I think Altergeist is a deck that has like a super high potential and super high ceiling.
Yeah.
I think it has to be like your day when you're playing it, and you just have to get lucky. And then at YCS Chicago in February of this year, I decided to play a terrible Trickstar list. It was cool. It was super cool because I main decked it was pure Trickstar. I main decked Mech Knights, goes in matches, a lot of traps. I main decked no draw and I side decked no draw. It was a really interesting decision on my part that I got some ideas from like the OCG, and I started off 6-0 at that event, even though I went literally like with no expectation. I thought I was just gonna go X2 drop and then just hang around in the city. But I started off 6-0 somehow, and then I unfortunately played back-to-back Thunder in round 7 and round 8, and there went my tournament. But yeah, I played like nothing but bad decks, or at least poor deck choices for the events that I went to. But like finally, once our World Championship qualifier was approaching, and I like decided to play a real deck, in the weeks leading up, I had just been like consistently winning with the Salamangreat deck that I played, just because I don't know. I've always told myself, and I've always believed that if I played a deck in which like can consistently play, if that makes sense, that I'm always gonna do well.
Yeah.
And that's something that Salamangreat like really excelled at, because almost all your hands do the same thing. And so like the deck felt really good in my hands, but even then, it's just like, since I had such a mediocre season prior to Nats, I felt like I was just gonna do poorly. Well, and then I lost round 1 of Nats too, which was I was like, oh yeah, I was right. This event's gonna suck. And then, but somehow I just kept winning and winning and winning and winning. So yeah, it got to the point where obviously, I was in top 16. I was like, wow, I can't believe I made it this far again. And I played against a very, very good opponent. His name is Furman Reed. A lot of people may not know his name, but he also actually made it to the top 16 of Nats last year, losing only to Gabe in top 16.
Mhm.
And so when I sit against him, I'm like, oh wow, look, I can't believe I'm making it this far again, playing against really strong players. And when I beat him, I'm like, wow, I can't believe just back-to-back years. The thought of going to Worlds was just racing through my head, and it's just a surreal experience because as prepared as you might be, it's really difficult to go into a tournament and think, okay, I'm gonna just make it to the top 8 again, whatever, no problem. Especially for a tournament that's as big as our World Championship qualifier was with 2,100 people. But at the end of the day, it's you're not playing against 2,100 people. It's just one opponent at a time, and you just have to take it one match at a time. And that's really all I did that weekend. I just was doing well, and yeah, like I said, I almost missed. I almost won. I lost in top 8, but it was cool nonetheless. It was a great experience.
Yeah, and obviously it would have been back-to-back worlds for you. So let's maybe go to your last year Worlds Championship qualification process. You qualified at Nets as well, right? You made top 4 at Nets, or how did you go to Worlds?
Yeah, so last year I also did it pretty much the same way. I made it through Swiss. I finished X1-1. I finished 10th in Swiss.
Mm-hmm.
And then I just won out until top 8. And then my top 8, I actually had a written feature match versus Denny Vu. Oh, excuse me, Denny Yu. Sorry about that. Very good player,
Yeah.
YCS champion. Multiple accolades in the game. And I beat him. He was playing Goki, and once I beat him, that had officially qualified me for Worlds. So unfortunately, I lost in top 4 on stream to my good friend Walter. But at that point, even he and I discussed before the match started, like at this point, none of us really cared about winning it because we were already qualified for Worlds. So that was a really cool experience.
Yeah, pressure
What deck
is
did you
off
play
at
at
that
that Nats?
Oh, the best deck. I played Trickstar Sky Striker. That was that deck was so insane. That was a great deck.
Goki was so much better.
Yeah, but to be fair, like we expected a lot of Goki at the event. And I only actually played around against two Goki in Swiss. But however, I prepared my main deck like with additional hand traps to be prepared against Goki because I figured like if I main decked cards like Shared Ride or Storm Duster or Mind Crush, while sure they would give me an edge in the mirror, those cards are typically super mediocre against Goki, and I knew that if I wanted to have a good tournament experience and do well, I had to cater my main deck to also be able to beat the Goki matchups that I would end up playing against. And that actually worked out really well for me because in Top Cut, top 64 I played against Goki, and top 32 I played against Goki, and then again, of course, in top 8 I played against Goki. So my theory definitely worked out in the end for me.
Yeah, and you said this year you weren't really going to Nets with the aim of going to Worlds because you had a bad season and so on. Was that feeling different last year? Were you more satisfied to go to Worlds there?
It's funny you asked that because so every weekend before our North American World Championship qualifier,
Yeah.
myself and my testing group, which comprises of my good friends Cesar Alcaraz, his brother Francisco Alcaraz, my boy Jose Remigio Guzman, our good friend Nuco as well, and then this year our friends Guillermo and Kevin. We always meet up at one of our houses and we'll just do like a 6 to 8 hour long testing session an entire Saturday.
Mm-hmm.
And at last year's testing session, I was just playing against all Trickstar mirrors because my friends were all playing Trickstar as well, and I actually did not win a single game versus my friends in testing. Yeah, it's crazy because also I played a lot of Dueling Book online as well leading up to last year's Nats, and I could not win a Trickstar mirror to save my life online as well. But this is something I've always said. I'm just like super unlucky online. I don't know what it is, but I'm like super unlucky online. But I don't know. I've always felt confident in a Trickstar mirror. So even though I kept losing versus my friends, I knew that if I were to play against like a bunch of mirrors in Swiss, I just like wouldn't lose any of them just because I'm so well versed in that matchup. And I think out of like the 6 mirrors I played in Swiss, I only lost one because I bricked the 3rd game. But like I was playing through, I would get reincarnation drilled. They would like double storm duster me end phase, and I would still win almost all of those games just because I knew the matchup so well. So last year I was more confident. However, this year, like I said, with the salad deck, like leading up to the event, I was winning a lot and I felt really comfortable with the deck. But there were also just situations like my good friend Caesar this year was playing Orcust, and when I would test versus him, sometimes it's just the game would just be out of your control because if you don't draw a hand trap and they just full combo you in your hand, you don't have like enough extenders to play through the board, or sometimes you just can't play through the board at all.
Yeah.
It felt really weird because I knew that going into this event, there were a lot of decks and matchups where if you just don't draw the right cards that you need, the matchup just genuinely tends to go out of your control. So I was confident with the deck that I was playing, and I knew that I could do well. As long as I was able to play, but I had it in the back of my mind that I just had to accept those matches where there's just nothing you can do and just move on with it and get ready for the next game. But like I said, the Salamangreat deck felt really good in my hands leading up to the event. So once I was there, and I actually it's crazy. I actually learned some stuff like playing the deck at the event because prior to Nats this year, I had actually never played Salamangreat at a major event before. Besides a Los Angeles Regionals that I left after like round 4 because Los Angeles Regionals are notoriously long, and I didn't want to stay until like midnight just playing a regionals. But yeah, prior to that nationals, I had actually never played Salamangreat at a YCS, at a UDS, or anything. So I was actually learning as I was going. But I tend to pick up things from like these kind of control type decks really quickly and really well, and try to and I noticed some cool stuff like if you have Falco in your hand, right, and you make Stalio by normaling Falco or whatever earlier in the turn, then it's better to summon Foul off of Stalio instead of Jaguar because you can bounce Foul back with Falco to then get Foul to trigger itself to get the free rank for that way. And little things like that I learned during the tournament actually, so it was really cool. And I don't know, Salad is just a sick deck, man.
It is, or it was. I don't know. Do you think it is still
It
valuable?
was. Yeah, that's actually a really good question because I went to a local this past Friday with the intent of testing out Salamangreat for the new format.
Yeah.
And at this specific local that I attended, I specifically built my deck to maximize consistency and maximize the combo potential, like to get access to Stalio. So I main decked like 3 backup secretary, I main decked the psychic wielder, I main decked emergency teleport, multiple copies of will, I main decked the foolish burial, like almost every extender that you could potentially think of, like regardless of dangers, because I'm not a fan of dangers in that deck. And even with all of these extra extender type cards, I felt that the deck was super inconsistent. And I just really felt uncomfortable with the deck. Now, the fact that they hit Circle to 1, because it was pretty easy to expect that Gazelle would go to 1, just judging how the OCG's ban list had shaped out in the past as well.
Yep, agreed.
But we thought, at least I thought, okay, they're going to hit Gazelle to 1, that's fine. With 3 Circle, this deck is still insane. But with 1 Circle, the deck's consistency really takes a hit. And while I've actually been doing a lot of thinking about this, I think that the deck will continue to top events in the upcoming. Like I think for YCS Portland, for instance, which is on August 23rd, I definitely think there will be some Salamangreat in the top cut. However, I think that the Salamangreats that do top, it's just going to be, like I said earlier, it's going to be that person's day. Because now with the big hit of consistency that the deck has taken, you really do have to just get lucky and hope to draw like all the your Signet Minings, your debugs, your Foxies, your Spinnies. Because now it's just with 2 less Gazelle and 2 less Circle, the deck really does feel super inconsistent, even with the additional extender cards. So while I'm personally not a fan of the deck anymore because it kind of like goes against what I like in a deck, which is being able to do the same thing every single time. I still think that it's a good deck, but it just has more luck involved than it did in the past, at least.
Yeah, surely. Interesting point. You talked about your testing group for last year's Nats and for this year's Nats as well. And after qualifying for the World Championship, there's a whole different situation because now you have to test for a tournament which only you will be attending of your testing group. Would there still be the same testing circle? And would they be like, yeah, we will take one for the team and we'll test the World's format with you? Or how was that?
Yeah, I actually got a lot of help last year. So after getting fourth at Nats last year, obviously I get like a lot more exposure, a lot more people messaging me and stuff.
Yeah.
And I had
Yes.
some more people that helped me out to test that were willing to assist me. Like I tested with my good friend Zach Stone. He helped me learn the Sky Striker matchup.
Mhm.
I tested with Ed, helped me out a little bit at Deception, but in reality, the majority of the testing that I did was still with my good friends,
Mhm.
because they're there to help me. Like we all help each other. We've all built each other up from when we had no tops together. Now we have a bunch of tops together. I've been to Worlds, which is like super crazy, just judging from like our little humble beginnings here in Hawthorne, California.
Yeah.
So I'm it doesn't matter what event I'm going to go to. I know that my testing partners are always going to be the best testing partners because we understand the game really well and we understand each other's play styles really well and know what suits our play style, what we need to do to improve and stuff like that. So I did mainly test with the same people, my friend Caesar, Francisco, Jose, Nico, all those guys.
Mhm.
But I did have some more additional help. Oh, I also tested a good amount with Walter Jewell last year as well. And let me just bring up a quick side note because everybody still makes fun of him to this day for playing paleo. Um, we tested online. I was obviously testing Altergeist prior to the actually going to the World Championship, and he was testing Paleo online, and I could not win a single game versus him because the way he had built his deck was actually just super strong. With goes in matches and stuff like that.
Mhm.
That the matchup was just super hard for Altergeist, and while it just felt super unconventional to play Paleo at Worlds, especially with just one Toad, in testing the deck, I guess it just overperformed to the max because he would just wipe me with that deck. So when he actually ended up deciding to play Paleo, I was like, all right, this guy's probably going to do super well. And then he gets evenly matched literally game one of Worlds. So
Oh,
that was pretty much just telling of how that event was going to go for him. So
feels
stop,
bad, man.
stop, stop giving him shit because it was actually a good choice after all the testing that we did. But to answer your question, yeah, the majority of my testing did stay within my friend group because we can. It's something that I'm sure we're going to get to a little later in the podcast, talking about how we expect the world's ban list to come out. We already had an idea of what cards would be hit, what cards wouldn't be hit, and such. So
Mhm.
we just prepared that way, and they they definitely helped me out for the event.
Yeah, like what is the first point when you prepare for Worlds? Is it you look at the list and see what deck is the best, or guess what deck is the best, and then test all that, or where do you get your inspiration for that specific format for?
Okay, so traditionally, the world's ban list is a mixture of the OCG ban list and then, of course, the TCG ban list,
Yeah, yeah,
and
sure.
it usually takes up the less amount of cards. It's hard to explain. So let's say, for example, for this year's Worlds, Gazelle is at 1, correct? Japan had it at 1, and they're using our old ban list. They had Gazelle at 3, so obviously they're going to use Gazelle at 1.
Yeah.
Um, or this is another example for last year's ban list. We had 1 Solemn Judgment at the time. They had 3. For Worlds, we can only use 1. So you could typically just anticipate what cards are going to be hit, what cards are not going to be hit, and then just go from there. Um, but at least the way I prepared for Worlds was that once you had a certain idea of what the ban list was going to look like, you had to look at every single deck that is still going to be viable, not just trying to figure out, okay, which is the best deck. Because if you just put your mindset to, okay, let's say, for example, for last year, for instance, Goki's not hit at all, Goki's the best deck. If you only like have that narrow mindset of, okay, I'm only going to test Goki because it's clearly the best deck, then you're going to miss out, excuse me, on a lot of potential things that you were to see if you were testing the other decks, like Altergeist, like Sky Striker, like Trickstar, that were all relevant at last year's Worlds as well. Because the thing that happens when you're testing other decks that are also going to be available at the tournament and you're going to most likely play against
Yeah.
is that not only do you learn how the decks play and where you're supposed to stop them and what you're supposed to interact with them at certain points, you also learn the tech cards that the decks could play um, for like certain matchups. Like for instance, like Altergeist last year, some people were taking. I think the card is called Battle of the Elements, which is kind of like a one-turn goes in match.
Yeah.
Um, and if you're just
Yeah,
like,
right,
if you just go into the tournament and think, okay, Sky Strikers, everything's at 3. I'm just gonna play Sky Striker. I'm not gonna even bother testing the other decks. You might miss out on seeing those tech cards and seeing what kind of card pool is available to the other decks. And by missing out on those card pool selections, then you're missing out on like the best possible preparation that you can have, like going into the tournament. At least that's just the way I see it.
Yeah, that's so amazing that you have to do so much testing and preparation for such a small event in the end, right? There's only around 20 players, and you tested for it like more than for a YCS or for something, because the event has so much more prestige and it's so much more important for your resume to do well at Worlds. It's just so sick.
Yeah, it's super cool. The aura of being at Worlds is just super sick. I remember flying into Japan on Wednesday before the event. That's pretty much when all the players arrived. And at the hotel we were staying at in Japan, there was a room on like the 28th floor or something like that, where all the players got to check in as soon as they arrived. And I remember walking into this room and just seeing like all these players that I had just like known from the past. Like, oh my god, this guy's here. I know this guy. I know this guy. I know this guy. And it's just a super cool feeling.
You were like the fanboy, yeah?
Yeah, man, it's cool seeing these people because I've
Of
been a fan
course,
of.
of
I've been
course.
playing the game since I was 3 years old, but I've been
Yeah.
keeping up with the game since I was like 12. So I had seen like I knew of Galley since I was like in middle school. I knew of players like who else was there last year? I don't know, but just like big names like that. It's people that I've been seeing since I've been playing competitively, like at a young age, and it's like, oh wow, like finally I'm here, I'm a part of this, and it's just a really cool force to like to validate all the hard work that you've put into the game.
Yeah, it's
Yeah, I can see
it's
that.
just
I'm
grown. It's grown.
also always fanboying when I'm at a YCS.
Sure,
It's
that's a good
crazy.
thing. It's a good thing. If you have
Yeah, and then
friends doing well, that's super cool.
I think something that a lot of people just don't realize is that I mean at the end of the day, these are all just guys and like girls. These are all just regular people that are just playing a game. So like let's say for instance, you might be a huge fan of Joshua Schmidt. I mean, why would you be? But he has multiple wins or whatever, and you're like, wow, you see him at an event, you're like, that's the Joshua Schmidt. But at the end of the day, he's just Joshua from Germany. He's just some guy from Germany that's just good at this game. At the end of the day, we're all just regular people. So I've learned that as well. It's like everybody's also just super nice and just easy to talk to because it's just this is something that I really like to stress. And some of my friends don't like it when I say this, but at the end of the day, we're just playing a card game. So
Oh,
it's it's
oh, oh.
it's a really cool card game that has opened up many opportunities for a lot of us, obviously. But when you start to overthink it and you start to put like too much emphasis into it and you start to stress yourself out or give yourself like too much issues to worry about because of the game, I think it's very important to take a step back and actually reflect on yourself and think, okay, it's just a card game. I mean, sure, there's some stuff writing in, whatever. But at the end of the day, it's just something that I'm here to do for fun because I love. And a lot of people don't
Brian,
don't understand that. Yeah.
you're kind of taking away the purpose of this podcast right now.
No, man. Like I said, I love Yu-Gi-Oh, and I've been playing it since I was a freaking a toddler. But I think it's also very important to understand that everything is just I don't know. I think some people just put like I know I put too much stress on myself in the past to like top events and do well, but it wasn't until I started like relaxing more and just taking it easy and understanding that okay, whatever happens happens. It's just a game. I'm gonna do well. I'm gonna do bad. It's all right. Once I started like taking that mindset on, I definitely started seeing the results and doing a lot better.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had the same experience. It was kind of a fanboy experience on my first international YCS in Rimini, where a friend of mine asked me if I would come as well, and then he booked me into a room with strangers. I didn't know any of them, and one of them was Zona Günger. I don't know if you've heard of him. The German ones for sure, but I don't know if you know him. He won like a Faro tour back in the day and topped multiple YCS, and I was a really big fan of Zona. And I was really nervous around everyone. I also met Umut and all the other. I met Norman Wilde. He was also a good player at that time back in the day. And at night, I was like, it was really weird to sleep in a room with 4 people I didn't know. But then Zona said, "Yeah, we are all playing Yu-Gi-Oh. It's good. We're all playing the same card game. We can find stuff to talk about. Don't have to feel
Exactly.
uncomfortable
Yeah.
around us."
Yeah.
That was amazing. That was the moment where I really bonded a lot more with Yu-Gi-Oh than I already did. That at that moment it became more than a card game to me, I think.
That's a heartwarming
Emotional
story.
story. Yeah, it indeed is.
It
But let's
is.
get back to Worlds, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, you said that it's a game and you have to keep that in mind. And so, what do you think about the world points leader race. Did you even think about going for the leaderboard, going for the playoff, or did you never even think about it?
I considered it before the start of this year's season.
Yeah.
But there's like a lot of factors that, at least for me, um, don't particularly stand out for me, and something that like doesn't interest me as much. Like going to Worlds is obviously an amazing experience.
Mhm.
Not only are you playing at the most prestigious tournament of the year with the chance of becoming the Yu-Gi-Oh! World Champion, but at the end of the day, it's also just like a vacation that Konami pays for. That's super cool, but it's a super huge grind that you have to do throughout the year. And at least the thing that like really detests me the most about the Worlds grind is that you just have to play so many regionals, and I notoriously hate regionals. I've like, believe it or not, I've actually only ever topped one regional in my life. I think regionals are super difficult. At least the Southern California regionals. I think these tournaments are super hard.
But you're having
And
like so many players attending, right?
yeah, the average California regional gets like nowadays gets around anywhere from 400 to 500 players.
What the?
Back in the day, it used to get like 1,000 plus consistently. So they used to like 1 day YCSs where you could only lose one round. All right. But yeah, having spoken to some people in the past that had done the Worlds race, or at least attempted it, said that like playing the game that much made them like fall out of love with the game, and that's something that I like never want to do. So it's just something that doesn't really interest me as much. And like a big reason that I play the game is because like I've met some of my best friends playing the game. And like getting to go to tournaments with them and hanging out and playing is super cool because it's always a good time hanging out with them. But if
Yeah.
I were to do the Worlds race, like I'd kind of have to do that alone, and that takes out like a big aspect of what I enjoy about playing Yu-Gi-Oh so much. So it's just not something that particularly interests me. Besides the fact of potentially getting to go to Worlds again, which is obviously super cool.
Yeah, absolutely. So maybe let's go into the Worlds tournament then. So you decided to play what deck for Worlds last year in the end?
Yeah, so last year I was in between I think 3 decks in testing. I was testing Altergeist, I was testing Sky Striker, and I was testing Trickstar at the end of the day.
Mhm.
I eventually decided not to play Sky Striker because I felt that the Goki matchup was a little too difficult for that deck. So I was between Altergeist and Trickstar, and I had built a super cool Trickstar list, but I felt like how am I going to take Trickstar to Worlds when it's just not that great? Because last year, Life Stage was hit to 1, Reincarnation was also hit to 1. So those kind of cards, like, it hurts the consistency of the deck, and with Reincarnation at 1, it hurts like some of the stuff that the deck should be able to do, at least at the time.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So I ultimately did decide to play Altergeist for last year's event because we expected obviously a lot of Goki at the event, and we felt that Altergeist had the best matchup versus Goki, so that's what I decided to play.
Yeah. And how did you do them?
So it's crazy. Like I actually only got I think 2 hours of sleep before the event.
Why though?
The excuses coming in already.
No, because I was actually I typically don't sleep much anyways, but with like the jet lag and stuff and just being super hyped and excited to play the tournament, I didn't get much sleep, but I was like super prepared. I was very confident that I was going to do well at the event. And like going into the event, I really wanted to play against some of the Japanese players because you hear, okay, the OCG wins Worlds like every year. You want to play against these guys to see what makes these guys so good. So I was going to the tournament like, okay, let me play against an OCG player. Let's see how good they are. Let's see what makes them so different than us, and let's just see how it goes, right? So Worlds last year was actually like it's in an interesting venue. So if you saw the stream from last year from the final, that was like in a huge convention hall where they had like seats for hundreds of people to watch and everything. But for the actual tournament itself, where like all of Swiss took place, was in a rather small room within that convention hall,
Mhm.
and they had us like all packed in there, and they would post pairings. I think it was outside of the room or maybe inside of the room. I don't know, but I got paired up round 1. I don't remember the opponent's name, but he was a Japanese player. So right off the bat, I was excited. I was like, oh, great! I came to Worlds. I wanted to play against one of these guys, and I get to do it. I remember specifically winning the dice roll and my hand being absolutely insane. I I drew like Marionette Cherries, Rivalry, like Solemn Strike, spoofing. My hand was super crazy. And I was like,
Mhm.
okay, I wonder what. Actually, prior to the event, we had heard that some of the Japanese players were testing Goki with like main deck twin twisters and stuff. So I felt, oh, okay, it doesn't matter because I have cherries, I have spoofing, I have strike. Even if they have twin, then I'm like super prepared to win. And then he activates engage, and I'm like, oh, okay, these guys are playing Sky Striker, and we start playing, and I end up winning game one. But a big issue occurred last year in which if you needed to ask for an interpreter, you couldn't just say you couldn't just like turn to the interpreter and be like, "Hey, I need to ask a question or something," because where I got paired up to sit for round one, I was sitting right next to the interpreters, which was at the end of the room. So even though they were right next to me, I couldn't just turn and be like, "Hey, can you tell this guy, chain? I want to chain or something like that." If you wanted to get an interpreter, you had to raise your hand, call for a judge, inform the judge that you wanted an interpreter, and
Oof.
then they would get the interpreter over, and that's when the questions could be answered and stuff. And the biggest issue about this is that they were not giving time extensions for these interpretive
Oh,
questions.
Wow.
Yeah, it was a huge problem. So my game one, it took like 20 minutes because we had like 12 minutes of interpreter questions. Um, and even though it was a super easy game for me, like if we were to just be playing regular, like no need for interpretation questions or any small stuff like that, the game would have finished quickly and we could have moved on to the next game. But because of all the interpretation questions I had, the game one took 20 or 25 minutes or so. And then our game two, we had even more interpretation questions, which took like an additional 10 minutes. So we had to start game three pretty much in time with the old time rules. And there was no Hayate, thankfully, in the past, so you couldn't just, or Kaina, so you couldn't just cheese me to win. So unfortunately, I ended up drawing with that opponent in round one. But like a big aspect of that was just because of all the interpretation questions I had to ask and not receiving a single time extension for any of those, which was just absolutely ridiculous in my mind.
Mhm.
Um, so I was a little rattled by that. Not like I wasn't shaking, like at least in terms of my how I'm playing in the tournament, but just a little angry. Like, okay, they should have definitely had some system in place to like pause the clock for a person that needs an interpretation question or whatever. But I figured, okay, this is just what it's gonna be. I just have to adapt and so on. So I started round one with a draw. Round two, I played against another Japanese player, and I win the dice roll again, thankfully. Game one, again, I open absolutely insane, full Altergeist stuff. Um, I see he's playing Sky Striker. He tries to play through, but I just had too much, so he just scoops pretty quickly. Game two, he goes first. He opens Twin Twister and Mystical Space Typhoon. Not much you can do about that if you're playing Sky Strike, Altergeist. And lastly, game three, I go first. My hand is really good. I think, oh, sweet, I'm going to win this round. My hand is like Marionetter, um, Multi-Faker, Mind Crush, like Unending Imperial Order. My hand was really good. And my opponent starts his turn by normal summoning Inspector Border.
Ooh.
And I was like, oh,
oh,
here we go. Yeah, super good card, obviously, versus Altergeist. Kills my monster and then just passes. He sets a few back row passes. I draw. I set one. I have to pass. He starts his turn. He activates Rhoda. I chain Imperial Order, and he chains his Unending Nightmare, and the game was over from there. So,
Ooh.
Inspector Border Unending Nightmare might as well be an FTK versus Altergeist. So, it was unfortunate that I lost, but I figured, okay, I'm X1-1. I just got to win 3 in a row, and I can still top, right?
Yeah, sure.
What was more unfortunate leading up to that point, however, was that my deck was prepared to be the mirror and of course Goki. I had yet to play a mirror or a Goki going into round three, so I'm like, all right, let me just play against the Goki, let me play against the mirror, and I'll be good to go because I'm really confident against those matchups. Round three, I get to play against the Central American World Championship qualifier. A good friend of mine, his name is Roger Guzman from Mexico.
Mhm.
And I had heard that I thought he was playing Goki earlier in the event, at least from what I heard him speaking with the other Mexicans at the venue. And I win the dice roll, and again my hand is crazy, so I'm like, oh sweet, I'm just gonna win. He double twin twisters me and then activates engage, and I'm like, well, okay, sure. So I
No
obviously
Goki for
lost
you.
that game. Yeah, no Goki there. And then I go first game two, I get even lead, and then I get twin twisted, and that was my world's tournament. So
Ooh.
I went in expecting to play Goki and Altergeist and maybe like one Sky Striker, and I ended up playing Sky Striker, Sky Striker, Striker back to back to back. It was super unfortunate. But at Worlds, you actually are not allowed to drop, so you're forced to play round 4 and 5.
Yeah, I was about to
Round
ask that. Would you have dropped if you would have been allowed to?
No, I would have continued playing just
Yeah.
because it's you're at Worlds. So
Yeah.
round 4, I got paired up against my friend Isaiah Joseph, who got third at the North American World Championship qualifier last year. I knew he was playing a mirror because we also helped build our decks prior to the event because we're good friends. I 2-0'd him in like 10 minutes. And then round 5, I played against Ryan Levine, who was from representing the North America as well, based off of the points leaderboard. And then I 2-0'd him as well in a mirror match. He was playing Bowden's same deck list. And our matchup, while obviously there was no stakes in it involved at the time, it was actually super cool and super fun because I made him deck out twice. So that was a really interesting matchup. But yeah, it was just my tournament experience was just a little unfortunate just because I did not play against any of the matchups that I was actually prepared for. But it was okay nonetheless because I was still just happy that I was able to be there and just being able to play in the tournament. It's like once in a lifetime opportunity. So while I may not have done so well at the time, I was just still happy to be there.
I can totally understand that. And do you have any hope to still go to the World Championship as a competitor this year?
Yeah, so for those that may not know, I obviously after losing top 8, at least in North America, I'm not sure if this is how it's done in Europe as well. You
Yeah,
have
it
to
is. It is.
play a 2 matches in a row to try and get 5th place. So immediately after I lost in top 8, I had to play against for my like 6th, 7th place playoff match, and I played against Amir, and I 2-0'd him in like 15 minutes, and then for my 5th place playoff match, I had to play against Orcus, and I managed to win that as well. So I ended up being 5th place, which means that if any of the top 4 guys, for some reason, aren't able to attend the World Championship this year, I will be the alternate for North America. And I had some hope leading up to about last week because I had heard some rumors here and there about maybe one of the guys not being able to go. But once the like official images came out for the World Championship this year for the teams competing. That means it was set in stone. So I'm not going to be going this year,
Yeah,
but it's okay because getting 4th last year and getting 5th this year, back-to-back years in a row, is like a super huge accomplishment. So I'm still proud of myself.
definitely. No need to shame there. So, did you already test for this year's Worlds then? Because there was some hope that you're maybe going.
Oh yeah, definitely. I had been testing for this year's Worlds pretty much since after Nats, getting a good idea of what to expect from the ban list, what decks are going to be viable, what decks are not going to be viable, what the card pool should be, what cards are going to be better at Worlds than they were in our format, for instance. So I was definitely testing. I was testing also with Gabe, who is one of our representatives this year as well.
Yeah.
I was talking with people that I went to Worlds last year, like I was talking with Walter Jewell, talking about what decks could be viable for this year's stuff. And then, so yeah, I definitely put some time into it. I've also tested a little bit with Joshua, my teammate, who obviously is going to Worlds, a representative for Europe. So I did do a little bit of testing, a lot of theory as well. So I kind of have a good idea of what we should expect for this year's World Championship.
Do you mind sharing with us?
Yeah, of course. I'm obviously not going to share what decks the people I played
Yeah, of
against were
course, of
testing and
course, of
stuff,
course.
because I don't want to do them dirty like that. But I think a lot of people will have realized by now that the ban list has like officially been publicly released. Um, the decks that you should expect to perform at least the best at the tournament should be Salamangreat, because you have to remember that they're taking account our previous ban list, not our
It's
most
the
current
three
one.
circles.
Exactly. So they still have 3 circle, which like is super important to the consistency of the deck. So Salamangreat is still going to be very powerful for the event
Yeah.
because that's really the only hit that that deck has. So Salamangreat is going to be very strong, of course. I think Pure Endymion will be very strong as well,
Ooh.
as the only hits that Pure Endymion has are actually none. Like the cards that the pendulum, yeah, nothing has been hit. They have one harmonizing, one dark worm, one pendulum call, but you don't play those cards in Pure Endymion, so that deck is looking pretty decent. I think a deck that I'm personally a big fan of, Guru Subterror. I think that deck has a lot of potential for Worlds as well, as it has The only real hit the deck has is just one terraforming.
It also has like decent chances to be good in the TCG now for the next events like the
True,
CMS in Frankfurt. I think there's gonna be a big amount of Subterras around.
Yeah, definitely. I've always been a fan of that deck, and I think now with some of the changes on the newest Forbidden Unlimited list, I think the deck has some more potential. But specifically for Worlds, the only card that has been hit for the deck, excuse me, is just one Pot of Duality. So, like, that deck is still super strong. Like a lot of people have. I was going over a Zodiac thread, today, about the Worlds ban list, and I saw like everybody saying, "Oh, Sky Striker is gonna win Worlds. It's already confirmed. They have everything." But what a lot of people just don't seem to understand is that so Sky Striker, like the US, they only have one Kagari, so that's fine. We've been playing with that already. However, the hit to engage to 2, the hit to anchor to 2, um, those aren't as big of hits as you might think, because obviously the OCG has had engage and anchor to 2 for a while, and the deck has still been finding some success over there. But the big hits are one metaverse. They only have only one metaverse at World, so you can't do any dumb trap trick shenanigans. Um, they only have 2 Mystic Mine, and with 1 terraforming, so the chances of having access to Mystic Mine lessen, obviously. While they still have 3 multi-roll, the big hit that people aren't taking into account is that the Worlds this year will be played under the old time rules, which means that if time is called, it's not just proceed to the end of the phase, whoever has higher life wins. Each player will have each match will have an additional 3 turns to determine the winner, and that is huge.
Yeah, I didn't know
Especially
that. Where did they announce that?
that I believe is in the World's tournament policy
Oh,
for
okay.
this year. Yeah,
Sick, sick.
so that means that Sky Striker can't do its Hayate attack shenanigans,
Mhm.
Kaina attack shenanigans. The deck actually has to beat you now, and that's something that just a lot of people don't realize how crucial that is for the Sky Striker deck and like how it's supposed to play. So I think that like is a huge hit. And while I do think that Sky Striker is still a pretty decent deck for Worlds, that's probably the biggest hit that the deck has. And besides its like mediocre matchup versus Pendulum, I don't personally think Sky Striker is a great choice to play for Worlds, but I'm sure there will be 1 or 2 players that play it that will find success just because that's just the way this game goes. But besides Sky Striker, Guru, Salamandrate, and Pendulum, specifically Pure Endymion, I think that probably Jesse, because that guy's an insane deck builder. But somebody will probably cook up some crazy Guard Dragon combo deck because
Yeah.
while Red Eyes is banned, um, and there are obviously no dangers at Worlds because the OCG has yet to receive them. Um, every Guard Dragon card is still legal. So LP is still legal, Pisty is still legal, Aggerpain is still legal, Saryuja is still at 3. So I'm sure that there's some kind of crazy Crusadia Guard Dragon deck that, like I said, it'll probably be Jesse that cooks it up. But I'm sure there will be some crazy combo deck like that that will be cooked up and might succeed. But besides, I think those are like the big 5 that people should have in mind. It's Endymion, Salamandrate, Sky Striker, Guru, and then some kind of Guard Dragon combo deck. But besides that, there's actually a lot of kind of like rogue decks that I believe to be actually pretty viable. Um, unlike last year, in which Paleo only had 1 totally awesome, they have 3 Toad at this year's Worlds, so that makes a difference. People might play Paleo. Something I actually didn't mention. Altergeist. Altergeist we thought would be a deck because with the release of the new Salamangreat Link monster, I believe its name is like Almirage.
Yep.
Normal summoning Sangan gets you access to the 1 multi-faker. However, for those that have not seen the list, Salamangreat Almirage will not be legal for the World Championships this year. I believe that is because in the OCG it was released as a V-Jump promo. Um, and that means that some OCG territories did not have access to it immediately. So because of that, it is banned for Worlds, which is a huge hit for Altergeist consistency because now your only access to that 1 multi-faker is 3 Meliseeks for your normal summon for Linkuriboh and your 3 spoofing. So that hit of Amaraj actually is a huge hit for Altergeist, and because of that, I think that Altergeist is not necessarily a great choice for the World Championships. Um, Even though the OCG has been playing actually without Sangan for a little bit, which is just super weird because you obviously want to maximize your consistency in those kind of decks, but the OCG always plays weird decks, so that's on them. But yeah, Paleo has 3 Toad. Cyber Dragon is cool, although also like Salamangre Amaraj, Cyber Dragon Natcher or the level 2 or something like that. That's banned for Worlds, so that's a little hit. But Cyber Dragon might be cool. And then Magical Musketeer, the new Magical Musketeer Link monster, is actually legal for Worlds. So that might be a cool little sleeper deck that people might not pick up on. So there's a lot of interesting decks that can be and will be played at the World Championships this year. But if I were to just give like a downright prediction of what's going to win Worlds, I would probably just put all my money on Salamangreat. Deck is just so consistent. It does everything it wants to do almost every turn. It can main deck a million hand traps. It can main deck back row removal if you want to focus on that. It can side deck any answers that aren't in your main deck. It can play cards that just shut out your opponent in the extra deck, like Abyss Dweller. It could play cards like Tornado Dragon, which are very good versus Rogue. It could play like pretty much anything that you want to play, and you could build your deck to play however you want to play it. So I think that Salamangreat is just by far the deck to beat, but I do think that there are a lot of viable choices for Worlds this year.
Yeah, that was like an amazing summary. I I couldn't add anything to that because that really was an overview over all the decks that are really viable for the format, and I think the people enjoyed listening to you there. And maybe people,
I
mean,
hope so.
people can also take something away from it as well, because obviously we all have the World's celebration events going on, and so people can and have to play with that banners there if they want to get that cool promo cards set there. So yeah, that's always a cool thing.
Just to jump in real quick, the World Celebration tournaments are super fun. I got to play in one in 2017.
Yeah.
It's really cool because it really is just like you're playing at Worlds, so it's super fun, and obviously the prizing is also pretty cool as well. So those, you guys should definitely check those out if you have access to them.
Yeah, luckily
these promos are so neat.
They are, but luckily the World Championship is in my hometown this year, so I will be in the venue this time. So no celebration event for me, but some live coverage on site, which is pretty cool as well. So I would say we should probably wrap it up here, because we talked about last year's Worlds, your experience with it, and we also had an overview of this year's Worlds preparation and what decks are viable and over the whole format and so on. I think we have passed every point we wanted to talk about, right? Or is there anything to add?
No, I think that was about it.
Yeah.
I guess one last little thing I'd like to say that I didn't mention that
it.
I'm sure people would like to hear about is just like when you go to Worlds, you don't go to just play Yu-Gi-Oh! At least not in Japan. On Friday, they got to take us on a tour of Japan. We got to do some super cool stuff out there.
Yeah.
We had a traditional Japanese lunch. They took us to Akihabara, which was the like electronic city, and we actually got to go into some of the OCG card shops. And I'll never forget because on that Friday that we went on the tour, we were forced to wear our jerseys as well as our lanyards that had our name and our country. And when we walked into one of the OCG locals, it was so cool because there were people playing Yu-Gi-Oh on the side, and they like we all walk in and they just look at us like, oh my god, you know, these are the guys. It's a super cool experience because, like I said, it's kind of just like a little mini vacation that Konami pays for. So Worlds is just like an amazing experience, and hopefully some people more people get the chance to actually able to experience that tournament, because it's just, like I said, it's crazy to say it's once in a lifetime when we have players like Jesse going back to back, Gabe going back to back, Josh I think going back to back maybe. Yeah, I think this is Josh's 3rd year in a row. Obviously Gally, this is his freaking 5th Worlds. That guy's insane. But for the majority of us, it's an experience that we'll only get to experience once in our lifetime. So it's really something that you have to take all in while you're there.
Yeah, definitely. So it's really hard to get there, but when you're there, it's just pure enjoyment, right? You have to breathe every second of that experience and have to remind everything and remember everything, of course. And I think the trip to Japan obviously was pretty cool. I think it's always kind of sad for people when the World Championship is on their continent. For example, for players in Europe now, they've been to Berlin a few times probably already, and it's not like a big trip. So it would be much cooler to actually go to the US or go to Japan or so. So that's always like, sad. This year's Worlds is in my home continent. It's so annoying. Isn't
Yeah,
it?
but
Like it is, right?
it definitely would be. Like, for example, the world should be in the United States next year, at least just the way that it circulates. You know, Japan, Europe, United States,
Yeah.
so forth. So it's definitely like, oh man, you know, if I go to World United States next year, it's like it's whatever. Especially if it were like in Los Angeles or something, which I literally live here.
Mhm.
Well, at the end of the day, you can't really complain if you're going to Worlds. You know?
Yeah, true. Of course. And I
Yeah,
mean, you
shout out
get
to Jonas. You remember?
True. I mean, still it is Worlds,
Yeah.
as you say. It's not too
Yeah,
bad.
exactly. Because even though it may be in your own town, or even your own country or whatever, the stuff that you get to do at Worlds is just like unlike anything you'll ever experience at another tournament you've been to. So it's really cool.
Yeah. I'm wondering what the people will do in Berlin, actually. They will probably do some sightseeing as well. They will go to the television tower and so on. That's actually quite a funny thing to imagine, like seeing the world competitors walking through Berlin. I would like to see that. It's a funny picture in my head. Yeah, so let's just wrap it up right here. It was really a pleasure to have you on, Brian. You really had some nice insights and it was nice to listen to you, and it all made perfect sense. And yeah, I couldn't add anything to your strategy talk for the upcoming World Championship and so on. And really was super cool. So thank you for being with us.
Oh, thank you guys for having me. I really appreciate this. I really enjoy doing stuff like this. I love talking about the game. I'm a huge fan of it. I'm a student of the game. I love traveling and competing. It's one of like my favorite things to do in life. Just real quick, I'd love to shout out obviously my friends that I mentioned earlier, Team Big Dog, Caesar, Jose, Francisco, Nico, Kevin, Guillermo. Shout out to Big Daddy Erican. You already know, boss.
Yeah.
And then yeah, shout outs to my team E-Man Games who have like opened up a lot more opportunities for me in the game, and I have like made me grow as a player. And obviously thank you to you guys for having me on here. This was really fun to talk about this stuff, and I'd love to be on again sometime if you guys will have me.
Sure. I mean, nothing
Thank you.
speaks
I'll
against
take
it.
the shout out to us and to E-Man Games, of course, as well. So yeah, I think as all things are said, we can close this up now. So thank you guys for listening, and see you next week, or hear you next week, rather.